Yo, what is up guys, Fer here, and today we're going to be doing a prediction on the true bounties of the Warlords, because I think that's something that's going to come up very soon. In the previous chapter we saw that brand new was updating the bounties of the Warlords, so more than likely we're going to get that very soon. And given that we have seen the bounties of legends like Roger and Whitebeard, I don't think there's any reason for Oda to hide the unfrozen bounties of the Warlords, especially for individuals like Mihawk. I think that's someone whose bounty that a lot of people want to know about, given his ties to Shanks, the legendary duels. We all expect Mihawk's bounty to be hype, and from there we can really see how the world perceives Mihawk. So yeah, might as well give my thoughts or my prediction on what the bounties of the Warlords are going to be, given that they have lost their title. But once again, subscribe if you're new here and like the video. But let's get into this. Now, first things first, how does the government determine how much of a bounty you should have? Now, it says here that the amount of a bounty is determined in response to the perceived threat level of the criminal in question. The greater the threat to the world, the greater the bounty. So based off of that, we know that there's going to be several factors to determine how much bounty one should have. So things like individual fighting ability to how many allies one may have. It's basically traits that you have that could prove to be dangerous to the world. So there's a lot of factors here, and one of the biggest one is combat ability. And this is supported by the fact that Oda stated in an SPS that if Eno were to descend the Blue Sea, Eno would reach as much as 500 million berries, just based on his combat ability and potential. So that's one of the biggest factors we've seen when it comes to bounties. If someone has a really high bounty, that person more than likely is very powerful. And Oda uses this as a hype tool to hype certain characters like Katakuri, for example. Now there's two individuals that we're not going to talk about, and that is Doflamingo and Kuma. First and foremost, we know that Doflamingo has been captured, therefore shouldn't have a bounty because he's already captured. And secondly, with Kuma, for the most part, it seems like he's become entirely subservient to the Celestial Dragon, and we know that he also lost his mind. So I think these two are not going to receive anything because of the reasons I mentioned. So that leaves Mihawk, Hancock, Weevil, and Buggy. First of all, let's start off with Buggy. Now, even though we know he's a gag character, we know that he's involved with some of the most powerful characters in the series. We also know that he was on Roger's ship, which was the reason he became a warlord in the first place. And now we also know that he somewhat has a pretty large crew because he's been recruiting for the most part when he came into the New World, as Harujin and the other giants were there, even though they recently left. We also know that he has a lot of prisoners from Impel Down who considered him to be legendary because of his affiliation, and this is why they have so much trust in him, even though most of his hype is unwarranted. It's funny because anytime he tries to say the truth, he usually gets caught off by one of his followers, and then that follower proceeds to hype him up to crazy levels. And the funny thing is that in most cases, people go along with it. But let's get back on track here. So with Buggy, we know three factors are going to play a part to determine his true bounty: origin, history, and allies. His origin would be that he was a part of the Pirate King's crew, which is something that the government doesn't play with because of what the Pirate King's crew know. The history aspect would be him being a big player in the release of the prisoners in Impel Down. Him and Luffy were put on the same pedestal as the masterminds behind the prisoners escaping Impel Down. And the ally aspect will be his crew and his followers, but also his connection with Shanks, as the world government perceives them to be close. So one can assume that the world government thinks that he might have Shanks as one of his allies, which is massive, by the way. So going off of that, I would normally put Buggy at 400 million berries, but since he's a gag character and Oda loves putting him in positions that he doesn't want to be in, I'm going to place Buggy's bounty at 800 million berries. I feel like this is something that Oda is going to be doing with Buggy moving forward, and we're finally going to see that crazy reaction from Buggy once he sees his true bounty. Buggy is almost like the opposite of Chopper, whereas Chopper does actually put in work in arcs, but his feats get undermined, whereas Buggy doesn't actually do anything, but his feats get overhyped somehow. So I think that's something Oda is going to play with moving forward when it comes to Buggy's bounty. Now let's talk about Weevil. Now Weevil, we don't actually have that much information about him, but we have to use what we have right now to gauge his bounty. Now the first thing we know about him is that he's the self-proclaimed son of Whitebeard. It was also mentioned by Kizaru that his strength is reminiscent of a young Whitebeard, and that he's extremely powerful as a pirate. So that alone makes me think that his bounty is going to be much more combat related, which makes a lot of sense because he's a one-man army like Mihawk. So things like allies isn't really going to boost his bounty because he doesn't have any. We also know that he became a warlord during the 2-year time skip, and his bounty was frozen at 480 million berries. So that says something about it. We also know that he's been chasing the Whitebeard pirates in search of Whitebeard's possession, and we know that he's looking for Marco specifically specifically, and it was mentioned that he single-handedly defeated 16 pirate crews that were affiliated with Whitebeard. So a lot of things about him are pointing towards his individual strength, which will make up for the majority of his bounty. So with Weevil, we have two factors here. The first one being his individual strength. Again, being hyped up to be as strong as a young Whitebeard is pretty huge given Whitebeard's legacy, and the person that hyped him up was an admiral. So even though he might not necessarily be Whitebeard's son, there is some legitimacy when it comes to his individual power, and given that Marco is the person that he's looking for, we can assume that he plans on defeating Marco, who is first commander level. So my assumption here is that he should also be first commander level. And the second factor would be collateral damage, as it was stated that he's killed over 600 civilians. So he's someone that is dangerous to the people of the One Piece world. So based on that, I would put Weevil's bounty at 750 million berries. Then we move on to Bowen Hancock. Now she has a lot of things we have to take into account when it comes to her bounty. Now the two main things would be her individual strength and crew. Now when it comes to Boa's power level, I'm not exactly sure where to rank Boa, but in terms of portrayal, from what it seems like Oda is doing, is that she should be around Yonko commander level. She's made from the same cloth as the old warlords, which is Doflamingo, Mihawk, Crocodile, Kuma, and Moria. She possesses all three forms of haki, and she also has a pretty broken Devil Fruit. And she was also someone who was invited to be a warlord very early because they saw her potential. But even then, it's very hard to gauge Boa because we haven't seen her go up against other strong characters. Now we know that she made light of a vice admiral, but what we really want to see is her going up against, you know, like Yonko commander level individuals, Doflamingo, those kinds of people, right? So that we can really gauge what level she's really at. So it's very iffy with Boa when it comes to her individual strength, but I would assume that she's around 3rd or 4th Yonko commander level, but I may be wrong. Now the second factor is her pirate crew, which is pretty much an entire country, and this isn't your average country. Most of her pirate crew consists of haki users, so this is a huge problem, and I think this would warrant a significant boost in her bounty. Apart from that, there isn't really any other factor we can take into account, so we have to use those two factors as a gauge for her bounty. So when it comes to Boa, I think 80% of it would come from her individual strength, and the other 20% would be her pirate crew. So I would place Bowen Hancock at 800 million berries. And finally, we arrive at Mihawk, the world's greatest swordsman. We already know that Mihawk's bounty is going to consist mostly of his individual strength, if not all of it. Mihawk is one of those characters that I think we perceive to be one of the top tiers in the One Piece world. I mean, having the title as the world's greatest swordsman is huge because that's one of the world titles, and when we look at other world title owners, they are respected to be one of the strongest fighters in the series. We have Whitebeard, the strongest man, we have Dragon, the most wanted man, we have Kaido, the strongest creature, and then we have Mihawk, the world's greatest swordsman. So I think Mihawk is probably on the level of these people in terms of individual strength. Maybe he might be the weakest amongst them, but I still think he's on their level. But apart from that, we can't really use anything else because we don't really know what happened in the past with Mihawk, but we do know that he was once Shanks's rival. Now mind you, their duel was stated to be legendary by Whitebeard. Again, something that vouches for his individual strength. While Shanks became a Yonko, it seems like Mihawk became the world's greatest swordsman. So whenever Mihawk is brought into question, we usually go to Shanks because of their connection. So when it comes to Mihawk, his bounty is going to be more based on his individual strength because we don't really know much about his history. So I would place Mihawk at 2 billion berries, or at least in the 2 billion berry range, which would make him close to Blackbeard. And this is impressive because he would have the highest bounty for a single individual, whereas his bounty is based solely on his individual strength. So factors like allies, crews, history doesn't apply for Mihawk because he doesn't have those things. So I think this is probably one of the most impressive things we're going to see in the series. I don't think it's going to be far-fetched either because we know King and Kaido's crew probably has a bounty of 1.5 billion berries or more. So Mihawk's bounty without a doubt would be much higher than his because of his individual strength. So the Mihawk hype is definitely real. But that is pretty much it for this video, guys. Comment out below what you guys think. What bounties would you give the current warlords and why? Subscribe for more One Piece content on this channel. And yeah, guys, it is Pharaoh, and I will see you folks later. Peace.